The maintenance panel beeped 3 times and Daesung frowned at the display. Something was wrong with the fire suppression system in the east wing of the Valkyrian embassy. The readings showed normal, but his gut told him different. He had been working on Haven's Gate Station for 5 years, and he knew when equipment lied to him. He picked up his toolbox and walked down the corridor. The Valkyrian embassy always made him nervous. Everything was too clean, too perfect, with those strange blue lights that hurt his eyes if he looked at them too long. The aliens who worked here were tall and elegant, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. They barely looked at him when he passed by. To them, he was just another human maintenance worker. Invisible. The embassy was busy today. Some kind of ceremony was happening. Daesung saw dozens of Valkyrians in formal robes moving through the halls. He tried to stay out of their way as he headed toward the mechanical room. His supervisor had told him to be quick and quiet. Don't bother the diplomats. Fix the problem and leave. He was halfway through checking the pressure valves when the explosion happened. The blast threw him against the wall. His ears rang. The lights went out. Emergency strips along the floor flickered to life, casting everything in red. Then he heard the screaming. Daesung stumbled to his feet. Smoke was already filling the corridor. He grabbed his comm unit and tried to call for help, but the channel was dead. The explosion must have taken out the local network. He could see flames through the doorway, spreading impossibly fast. His training said to evacuate. Get out, let the professionals handle it. But the screaming continued, high-pitched and terrified. Someone was trapped in there. Daesung ran toward the fire. The heat hit him like a physical wall. The ceremonial hall was an inferno. The flames were wrong, burning green and blue. Chemical fire. The suppression systems he had been checking hung uselessly from the ceiling. Their nozzles melted shut. The irony would have been funny if people weren't dying. He pulled his shirt over his mouth and pushed forward. The smoke made everything dark. He followed the sound of screaming, coughing with every breath. His eyes watered. The heat pressed against his skin like hot hands. He found her in a side corridor. A young Valkyrian woman was trapped under a fallen beam. The metal glowed red with heat. Her shimmering skin had turned dark, like bruises spreading across her whole body. She looked up at him with eyes full of terror. Daesung didn't think. He grabbed the beam with his bare hands. The pain was instant and absolute. His skin sizzled. The smell of burning flesh filled his nose. He screamed but didn't let go. He lifted with everything he had. The beam shifted. The woman pulled herself free. She tried to stand but collapsed. Her leg was broken. Daesung looked around desperately. The fire was closing in. The ceiling groaned above them. They had maybe seconds before the whole corridor came down. He hooked his arms under hers and started dragging her backward. She was heavier than she looked. Every step was agony. His burned hands left bloody marks on her clothes. The fire caught his uniform jacket. He felt it melting into his back but kept moving. The woman was trying to say something, but he couldn't hear over the roar of the flames. He just focused on the exit, one step then another. His vision narrowed to a tunnel. The smoke filled his lungs. He couldn't breathe. Couldn't think, just pull. Just move. A support beam fell behind them, sending up a shower of sparks. The heat intensified. Daesung felt his skin blistering on his arms, his neck, his face. But the exit was there. Just a few more meters. He could see figures in the smoke. People waiting outside. He pulled her through the doorway and into the main corridor. Hands grabbed them both. Someone was shouting. Medical teams rushed forward. Daesung tried to tell them about the fire, about the chemical suppressant failure, but his voice wouldn't work. He looked down at his hands. They didn't look like hands anymore. Just raw meat wrapped around white bone. Strange. They didn't hurt as much as they should. Was that bad? The Valkyrian woman was being loaded onto a stretcher. She reached out toward him, still trying to say something. Medical equipment surrounded her. Then she was gone, rushed away by the emergency team. Daesung sat down. Or maybe he fell. The floor was cool against his back. That was nice. He stared at the ceiling and watched the emergency lights pulse. Red. Dark. Red. Dark. Like a heartbeat. Someone was talking to him. A medic, probably. He couldn't make out the words. Everything sounded underwater. Hands touched him gently, and even that gentle touch sent pain shooting through his body. He heard someone say something about burns. Severe burns, something about 40% coverage. That seemed like a lot. His eyes started to close. Before they did, he saw something strange. Through a window in the wall, high up near the ceiling, he thought he saw another Valkyrian watching him. This one wore elaborate robes, more formal than any he had seen. Her face was stern and unreadable. She stared at him with an intensity that cut through even his fading consciousness. Then the medics blocked his view, and darkness took him. Far away in a palace on a world he would never see, Queen Hana of Velkara stared at the holographic display showing her daughter's emergency beacon feed. She had watched everything, every moment of the human's impossible rescue, every second of his self-destruction to save her child. She touched the screen where the human's burned face was frozen in the recording. Her daughter was alive because this creature had decided her life was worth his agony. No calculation, no reward, just action. Queen Hana made a decision then. This human had saved the heir to the Valkyrian throne. He had saved her daughter, and he had done it without knowing who she was, without expecting anything in return. Such a thing could not go unanswered. She would learn everything about this human. She would understand what drove him to such madness. And when her daughter was safe, when the crisis had passed, she would summon him before her. The galaxy would learn what it meant when the Valkyrian Empire owed a debt. But first, she had to make sure he survived his own heroism. Dae-sung woke up to white ceiling, white walls, white sheets covering his body. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then the pain reminded him. It started in his hands and spread up his arms like fire was still eating him. His back felt tight, like someone had wrapped him in plastic that was too small. When he tried to sit up, every muscle screamed at him to stop. A nurse appeared beside his bed. She was human, which surprised him. She smiled and gently pushed him back down. Her hands were careful, not touching anywhere that hurt. "Easy, Mr. Kang," she said. "You've been asleep for 3 days. Your body needs rest, 3 days." The fire felt like it had happened 3 minutes ago. Dae-sung tried to speak, but his throat was raw. The nurse held a cup of water with a straw to his lips. The water tasted like metal, but felt like heaven. "The woman," he finally managed to say. "The one I pulled out. Is she alive?" the nurse said. "Thanks to you. Now stop talking and let me check your vitals." Over the next hour, Dae-sung learned the extent of his injuries. 2nd and 3rd degree burns across 40% of his body, mostly his hands, arms, and back. The doctors had used regeneration treatments, but some scarring was permanent. He would be in the hospital for at least 2 more weeks. What confused him was the room. This wasn't the standard medical bay where station workers went. This was a private suite with expensive equipment and round-the-clock monitoring. When he asked about it, the nurse just smiled and said his care had been arranged. On the 2nd day of consciousness, station security came to question him. 2 officers, one human and one from a species he didn't recognize. They asked him to describe everything he remembered about the explosion. Where he was, what he saw, who he helped. That's when they told him the truth. The woman he saved wasn't just any diplomat. She was Princess Nari, heir to the Valkyrian throne. The explosion had been a terrorist attack by an extremist group that wanted to start a war between humans and Valkyrians. They had targeted the ceremony specifically to kill her. Dae-sung stared at them. "Princess?" he repeated stupidly. The human officer nodded. "You saved the life of one of the most important people in the galaxy. That's why you're in this fancy room. That's why half the station's political section is losing their minds right now." After they left, Dae-sung lay in bed and tried to process this information. He had pulled a princess from a fire. The thought was absurd. He was a maintenance engineer. He fixed broken pipes and faulty wiring. He wasn't supposed to be involved in galactic politics, but he was now. The news feeds that his room console could access were full of the story. The attack had caused a massive diplomatic crisis. The Valkyrian Empire was furious. They were threatening to withdraw from the Coalition of United Worlds. Human extremist groups were celebrating the attack, claiming it proved that aliens didn't belong on human stations. Other groups were counter-protesting, holding up images of Dae-sung and calling him a hero. He hated it. He didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted to go back to work. On the 4th day, something changed. Additional security appeared outside his room. Not station security. These were Valkyrian guards in elaborate armor. They stood motionless by his door, saying nothing, but their presence made every nurse and doctor nervous. That evening, a Valkyrian official visited him. She introduced herself as Jiwoo, a cultural liaison. She was young for a Valkyrian, probably the equivalent of early 20s in human years. Her skin shimmered with a greenish tint, and she moved with the grace that all Valkyrians seem to have. "Mr. Kang," she said, bowing slightly. "I bring greetings from Her Majesty Queen Hana of Velkara. She wishes to express her deep gratitude for saving her daughter's life." Dae-sung didn't know how to respond to that. He settled for a nod. Jiwoo continued. "Princess Nari is recovering, though her condition remains serious. Valkyrian physiology does not handle heat trauma well. She is currently in an induced coma while her body heals." "Will she be okay?" Dae-sung asked. "The doctors believe so. Because of your quick action, her injuries were survivable." Jiwoo paused. "Queen Hana herself has come to the station. She wishes to meet you, once you're well enough." The idea of meeting an alien queen terrified him more than the fire had, but he couldn't exactly refuse. So he agreed. What Jiwoo didn't tell him was that Queen Hana had been watching him for days. Through the one-way observation glass that Dae-sung didn't know existed in his room, the queen had studied him. She watched how he treated the nurses, how he flinched at his own reflection when they changed his bandages, how he declined interviews with the media and turned off the news feeds that called him a hero. Queen Hana stood in that observation room now, with Jiwoo beside her. The young liaison had just returned from speaking with the human. "What do you think of him?" the queen asked without taking her eyes off Dae-sung. Jiwoo chose her words carefully. "He seems uncomfortable with the attention, Your Majesty. He does not act like someone who expects reward." "No," Queen Hana agreed. "He does not." She had watched the recording of the rescue a dozen times. She had analyzed it frame by frame. The human had burned himself without hesitation. No pause, no calculation of risk. He simply acted. It was irrational, dangerous, completely contrary to how any Valkyrian would behave in that situation. And yet, her daughter lived because of it. "Tell me, Jiwoo," the queen said. "What do you know of human psychology?" "They are emotional, Your Majesty, impulsive. They make decisions based on feeling rather than logic." "Yes," Queen Hana touched the glass. "We have always seen that as weakness. But perhaps—" She trailed off thinking. Perhaps they had been wrong. Inside his room, Dae-sung finally managed to sit up without crying out in pain. He looked at his bandaged hands. The doctors said he would regain most of their function, but they would never look the same. The burns had scarred deep. He thought about the princess. He hoped she would be okay. He tried not to think about the fact that he had held royalty in his burned hands while she bled on him. That felt too big to process. A message notification blinked on his console. He awkwardly used his bandaged hands to open it. It was from his supervisor at maintenance. Brief and professional. Dae-sung was being given medical leave with full pay for as long as he needed. His job would be waiting when he returned. That was good news, at least. He had been worried about losing his position. What he didn't know was that Queen Hana herself had contacted station administration. She had made it very clear that the human who saved her daughter would be taken care of. Any harm that came to him, any unfair treatment, would be considered a personal insult to the Valkyrian throne. The station administrator had immediately agreed. Outside, in the corridor, the Valkyrian guard stood watch. Inside the observation room, Queen Hana continued her study. And deep in the medical wing's intensive care unit, Princess Nari lay in her healing coma, her body slowly repairing the damage that would have killed her. The human had saved her. Now the question was, what would that mean for all of them? 2 weeks after the fire, Dae-sung could walk without wanting to scream. The regeneration treatments had done their work, but slowly. His hands still looked like melted plastic, and his back felt like old leather stretched too tight. The doctors said this was as good as it would get. He would carry these scars for life. He was learning to accept that. What he couldn't accept was the summons that arrived on his 3rd week of recovery. Official Valkyrian stationery, sealed with a symbol he didn't recognize. The message was brief and formal. Queen Hana requested his presence at the restored Valkyrian embassy. Tomorrow. Tengoi station time. Jiwoo arrived that evening to prepare him. She brought formal clothes, simple but clean, human-styled, since Valkyrian garments would never fit him properly. She also brought a crash course in royal etiquette. When you enter, bow from the waist, she instructed. Not too deep. 3 seconds. Do not speak unless she addresses you directly. Do not make direct eye contact for more than a moment unless she initiates it. Do not turn your back on her when you leave. Daesung's head spun with rules. What if I mess up? Jiwoo smiled. Then you mess up. Queen Hana is not unreasonable. She knows you are not Valkyrian. She will make allowances. That didn't make him feel better. The next morning, Valkyrian guards escorted him to the embassy. The building had been repaired with impressive speed. New walls covered the burned sections. Fresh blue lights illuminated the corridors. If you didn't know where to look, you would never guess that people had died here. They brought him to a large chamber with a high ceiling. The walls were covered in crystalline patterns that caught the light and split it into rainbows. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat Queen Hana. She was taller than her guards, easily 7 feet. Her skin had the same shimmer as other Valkyrians, but with a silver tone that marked her as royalty. Her face was angular and sharp, beautiful in an alien way that made Daesung's breath catch. She wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid metal, flowing and changing color as she moved. Daesung bowed like Jiwoo had taught him. He counted to 3 in his head, then straightened. Approach, Queen Hana said. Her voice was clear and cold like ice breaking. He walked forward on shaking legs. When he was 10 feet from the platform, he stopped. The guards had told him this was the proper distance. Queen Hana studied him in silence. Her eyes were completely black, no white visible, and they seemed to look through him rather than at him. The silence stretched until Daesung wanted to fidget, but he forced himself to stay still. Finally, she spoke. Leave us. The guards looked uncertain but obeyed. Jiwoo bowed and backed out of the room. Within moments, Daesung was alone with the queen. The doors sealed with a soft hiss. Queen Hana rose from her seat and descended from the platform. She moved like water, smooth and inevitable. She circled Daesung slowly, examining him from every angle. He kept his eyes forward and tried not to sweat. I watched you burn, she said suddenly. Daesung blinked. Your Majesty? My daughter carries an emergency beacon. For her safety. It transmits everything she sees and hears to me when activated. Queen Hana stopped in front of him. The fire triggered it automatically. I saw everything through her eyes. He hadn't known that. The thought made him uncomfortable. I watched you grab that beam with your bare hands, the queen continued. I watched your skin cook. I watched you drag her through fire while your uniform melted into your flesh. I saw it all. Daesung didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. Why? Queen Hana asked simply. Your Majesty, why did you do it? You are not military, not security. You had no obligation to risk your life. You gained nothing by this action. You nearly died. She stepped closer. Your species is not known for such selflessness toward others, especially not toward aliens. So I ask again, why? Daesung struggled to find words. How could he explain something he didn't fully understand himself? I heard someone screaming, he finally said. I couldn't just leave her there. Most people would have. Maybe, but I couldn't. Why not? He met her eyes, forgetting about etiquette. Because she was terrified and in pain and I could help. That's all. I didn't think about it. I just did it. Queen Hana was quiet for a long moment. You did not know she was princess. No, Your Majesty. Would it have changed your actions if you had known? Daesung thought about that honestly. Maybe I would have been more scared, but no. I don't think it would have changed what I did. Something shifted in the queen's expression. Not quite a smile, but a softening around her eyes. You are either very brave or very foolish. Probably foolish, Your Majesty. This time she did smile, just slightly. Perhaps. But my daughter lives because of your foolishness. She turned and walked back to her platform. I did not summon you here merely to thank you, though you have my gratitude. I have a request. Anything, Your Majesty. Once my daughter has recovered, I want you to come to Velkara, to be recognized for your deed, to be honored before my court. Daesung's stomach dropped. Your Majesty, I'm just an engineer. I don't belong in a royal court. Nevertheless, the Valkyrian Empire wishes to honor you. Refusing would be. She paused, choosing her word carefully. Problematic, it wasn't a request at all then. It was a command dressed in polite language. Daesung swallowed hard. How long would I need to stay? A few weeks. Perhaps a month. You would be treated as an honored guest. given quarters in the palace. You would want for nothing. Everything in him wanted to refuse, but he understood enough about politics to know that refusing would create problems. For him, for human-Valkyrian relations, maybe for everyone. I would be honored, Your Majesty, he lied. Queen Hana nodded, satisfied. Excellent. Jiwoo will make arrangements. Once Princess Nari is well enough to travel, we will depart. You will accompany us. She dismissed him with a wave of her hand. Daesung bowed again and backed toward the door, remembering not to turn his back on her. Just before he reached the exit, she spoke again. Daesung Kang. He stopped. It was the first time she had used his name. You ask me why I am doing this, taking you to Velkara, making such a show of gratitude. She leaned forward slightly. The truth is, I need to understand you. Your species. I have studied humans for years and I thought I understood you. But what you did? No Valkyrian would have done that. We value duty and honor, but calculated duty. Rational honor. You had no duty to my daughter. Your actions were not rational. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. Don't be. She stood. I have seen 1,000 humans, and all of them acted as I expected. Violent, greedy, selfish. And then you appear and act in a way that defies everything I thought I knew. So yes, I am taking you to Velkara. I am honoring you before my court. But more than that, I am studying you. Because if one human can surprise me like this, perhaps my understanding of your entire species is flawed. She waved him away again, and this time he left. Outside, Jiwoo was waiting. She saw his expression and smiled sympathetically. The queen can be intense. That's one word for it, Daesung muttered. As they walked back through the embassy, he thought about what Queen Hana had said. She was treating him like a puzzle to solve, a mystery to unpack. The idea made him deeply uncomfortable. He wasn't special. He had just done what anyone should do. But maybe that was the point. Maybe what anyone should do wasn't actually what most people did. Maybe Queen Hana was right to be confused. In the diplomatic chamber, alone with her thoughts, Queen Hana stood before a holographic display showing Daesung's medical scans. She studied the burn patterns on his body. The damage told a story of deliberate sacrifice. He had positioned himself to shield her daughter with his own flesh. Irrational, illogical, beautiful. She would understand this human. She would learn what made him different, and perhaps in understanding him, she would learn something about humanity that could change everything. 6 weeks after the fire, Princess Nari opened her eyes for the first time. Daesung heard about it through Jiwoo, who had become something like a friend during his extended stay on the station. The princess had no memory of the fire or her rescue. The doctors said trauma-induced amnesia was common with severe injuries. Her mind had protected itself by forgetting. Daesung didn't know if that made things better or worse. 3 days after Nari woke, preparations began for departure to Velkara. Daesung watched crews load the royal ship with a mixture of fascination and dread. The vessel was enormous, more like a floating palace than a spacecraft. Its hull was silver white and seemed to shift in the light, creating patterns that hurt to look at for too long. He had never left Haven's Gate before. His whole life had been spent on the station, maintaining its systems, keeping its people safe. The idea of space travel terrified him more than he wanted to admit. Jiwoo found him watching the ship from an observation deck. Nervous? She asked. Is it that obvious? She smiled. You have been standing here for 2 hours without moving. Yes, it is obvious. I've never been on a ship before, he admitted. What if I get sick? What if I can't handle the gravity changes? What if you worry yourself to death before we even leave? Jiwoo interrupted gently. The ship has full gravity stabilization. You will barely notice we are in space, and there are medications for motion sickness if needed. That helped a little, but only a little. The day of departure arrived too quickly. Daesung stood in the docking bay with a single small bag of belongings. Everything he owned fit in that bag. Somehow that seemed pathetic next to the Valkyrian officials with their staffs and multiple containers of possessions. Queen Hana arrived last, with Princess Nari beside her. This was Daesung's first time seeing the princess since the fire. She moved carefully, still recovering, but she held herself with the same regal bearing as her mother. When she saw him, she nodded politely. Just a diplomatic acknowledgement. Nothing more. Of course she didn't recognize him. She didn't remember. The interior of the ship was as overwhelming as Dae-sung had feared. Everything was crystalline and flowing, designed for beings taller and more graceful than humans. The ceilings were too high. The doorways were too narrow at the bottom and too wide at the top. He had to concentrate to walk normally instead of shuffling awkwardly. His quarters were surprisingly comfortable once he figured out how the furniture worked. The bed adjusted to his body automatically. The walls could change color based on his mood, which was both helpful and unsettling. A viewport showed the station outside, growing smaller as they prepared to depart. Jiwoo stopped by to check on him. "The journey will take 5 days," she explained. "We will be traveling through several jump points. You may experience some disorientation, but it will pass quickly." "Jump points?" Dae-sung asked nervously. "Shortcuts through space. Think of them as..." Folding the distance, she saw his expression. "It is safe. We have been using this technology for thousands of years." That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. The first jump was horrible. One moment they were in normal space. The next reality seemed to turn inside out. Dae-sung's stomach tried to escape through his throat. His vision blurred. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, he was absolutely certain he was dying. Then it passed and they were somewhere else. Stars he didn't recognize filled the viewport. He spent the next hour in his bathroom trying not to vomit. After the first day, he started to adapt. The ship's rhythm became familiar. Wake. Eat strange Valkyrian food that Jiwoo had to explain. Walk the corridors carefully, trying not to bump into things. Return to his quarters. Sleep. Repeat. Jiwoo visited him daily, teaching him about Valkyrian culture. There was so much to learn. How to address different ranks. What gestures meant what. Which topics were acceptable in polite conversation, and which were deeply offensive. Never ask a Valkyrian about their birth family, Jiwoo warned. We are raised communally. Family bonds are chosen, not biological. Asking about birth parents implies you think we are primitive. What about compliments? Dae-sung asked. If I want to say someone did something well? Be specific. Say what they did and why it was effective. General praise is seen as empty and manipulative. His head spun with information. How was he supposed to remember all of this? On the 3rd day, he encountered Princess Nari in one of the ship's observation lounges. She was alone, staring out at the stars. He started to back away quietly, not wanting to intrude, but she noticed him. You are the human, she said, not unkindly but without warmth either. Yes, Your Highness. I'm Dae-sung. I know who you are. My mother speaks of you often. She gestured to a seat. Sit, I do not bite. He sat, keeping a respectful distance. An awkward silence fell between them. They tell me you saved my life, Nari said finally, that you pulled me from the fire. Yes, Your Highness, I do not remember it. I remember the ceremony. I remember the ambassador giving a speech. Then nothing until I woke in the medical bay. She looked at him. What was it like? The fire. Dae-sung chose his words carefully. It was hot and loud, scary, but you were brave. You didn't panic even when you were hurt. That was mostly true. She had been terrified, but she had also tried to help herself, tried to move even with a broken leg. He saw no reason to mention the terror. I wish I remembered, Nari said softly. Everyone says you are a hero, that you risked your life for mine. But to me you are just a stranger. I do not know how to thank you for something I cannot remember. You don't have to thank me, Your Highness. She smiled slightly. My mother says you are modest. She was right. They talked for a while longer. Nari asked him about human culture, about life on Haven's Gate. He found himself relaxing slightly. She was still royalty, still impossibly important, but she was also just a person, someone who had been hurt and was still healing. When he returned to his quarters, he found a message waiting. From Queen Hana, brief and formal. She requested his presence at dinner that evening. The dinner was private. Just Dae-sung, Queen Hana, and Jiwoo to help translate any cultural confusion. They ate at a table that adjusted its height for Dae-sung's shorter frame. The food was strange but edible. Queen Hana asked him questions, dozens of them, about his childhood, his education, why he became an engineer, what he thought about aliens, about the coalition, about everything. Dae-sung answered honestly because he didn't know how to do anything else. He talked about growing up in the station's lower levels, about his mother who died when he was young, about finding purpose in fixing things and making systems work properly. You like order, Queen Hana observed. You like things to function as they should. I guess so, Daesung agreed. When something is broken, you can see it clearly. And when you fix it, you know you did something good. And yet you ran into chaos, she said. Into a fire where nothing functioned as it should. That seems contradictory. He thought about that. Maybe, but someone needed help. That seemed more important than staying safe. Queen Hana studied him across the table. Do you know what makes a good ruler, Daesung Kang? He shook his head. The ability to calculate cost versus benefit. To make hard decisions based on logic and long-term thinking. To sacrifice the few for the many when necessary. She paused. You would make a terrible ruler. Daesung didn't know if he should be offended. But you would make an excellent person, she continued. And that is rarer than you might think. The ship made 2 more jumps over the next 2 days. Each one was slightly less horrible than the last. Or maybe Daesung was just getting used to having his insides turned outward. On the 5th day, they arrived at Velkara. Daesung stood at the viewport and stared at the planet below. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. The continents were visible even from orbit, covered in forests that glowed with bioluminescence. Cities sparkled like jewels scattered across the surface. 3 moons hung in the sky, each a different color. Welcome to Velkara, Jiwoo said beside him. You're home for the next month. Home, the word felt wrong. This could never be his home, but for now, it was where he was going. The ship descended toward the planet's surface, toward the royal palace, toward whatever awaited him below. The palace was impossible to describe. Daesung tried to find words and failed. It rose from the center of the capital city like a mountain made of crystal and light. Towers spiraled upward, connected by bridges that seemed to float in the air. Waterfalls cascaded down the sides, the water glowing with the same bioluminescence as the forests below. At night, the whole structure shimmered with colors that had no names in human language. His quarters were larger than his entire living space on Haven's Gate. A bedroom, a sitting room, a bathroom with a pool instead of a shower, and a balcony overlooking gardens that stretched to the horizon. Servants appeared whenever he needed anything, silent and efficient. It was luxurious and deeply uncomfortable. He had 3 days to prepare for the ceremony. Jiwoo drilled him on protocol until he could bow and speak and move without making obvious mistakes. A tailor came to fit him for formal clothes. The garments were human-styled but made from Velkarian materials. They changed color slightly with his movements, subtle and beautiful. On the morning of the ceremony, he stood in front of a mirror and barely recognized himself. The scars on his hands were visible, no way to hide them. But somehow in these clothes they looked less like deformity and more like evidence, proof of what he had done. The grand hall was filled with thousands of Velkarians, nobles in elaborate robes, military officers in crystalline armor, diplomats from a dozen worlds. They all turned to watch as Daesung entered, escorted by royal guards. He had never felt so small. The walk to the throne platform was the longest of his life. Every eye followed him. Some faces showed curiosity. Others showed respect. A few showed obvious disgust. He kept his eyes forward and tried not to trip. Queen Hana sat on her throne with Princess Nari beside her. Both wore ceremonial robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. When Daesung reached the proper distance, he bowed deeply and held it until the queen spoke. Rise, Daesung Kang of Haven's Gate. He straightened, his heart hammered in his chest. Queen Hana stood and descended from the platform. She carried a small box of dark metal. The hall fell silent as she approached him. You came to Velkara not by choice, but by our request, she said, her voice carrying through the vast space. You stand before us not seeking glory, but accepting obligation. This humility honors you as much as your actions. She opened the box. Inside was a medal on a silver chain. The medal was shaped like a flame with a star at its center. The star of Velkara is given rarely, Queen Hana continued, only to those who have preserved our people at great cost to themselves. Wear it knowing that the Velkarian Empire sees you, knows you, and will not forget you. She placed the chain around his neck. The metal was surprisingly heavy. It rested against his chest, warm despite being metal. You are called upon to speak, Queen Hana said quietly. Just for him. Do not disappoint me. She returned to her throne. Daesung stood alone, facing thousands of aliens, expected to say something meaningful. His mind went blank. Then he thought about the fire. About the screaming. About Princess Nari's terrified eyes. And he knew what to say. "I'm not a hero," he began. His voice shook, but he forced himself to continue. "I'm just someone who heard someone screaming and decided to help. That's all. That's what anyone should do. Human, Valkyrian, any species. When someone needs help, you help them. That's not heroism. That's just being decent." He paused, looking at the sea of faces. "I know there's tension between our species. I know some humans hate Valkyrians. Some Valkyrians hate humans. But I think most of us, we just want to live in peace. We just want to take care of each other. And maybe if we all decided to help each other when we hear screaming, there would be less screaming in the galaxy." It wasn't eloquent. It wasn't poetic. But it was honest. And when he finished, the hall was silent for 3 heartbeats. Then someone started a slow, rhythmic tapping. A Valkyrian gesture of deep respect. It spread through the crowd until the sound was like rain on metal. Not applause, but something more profound. Daesung bowed again and retreated from the hall as quickly as protocol allowed. The celebration afterward was overwhelming. Nobles approached him with practiced politeness, saying words he was sure they didn't mean. Diplomats asked careful questions about human-Valkyrian relations. Military officers studied him like he was a tactical problem to solve. He smiled and nodded and tried to say the right things. Jiwoo stayed nearby, helping when he got confused. But exhaustion crept over him. Too many people. Too much attention. He wanted to disappear. Princess Nari rescued him. She appeared at his elbow and spoke to the noble who was monopolizing him. "Forgive me, Ambassador, but I must steal our guest." "Official business." The ambassador bowed and retreated. Nari guided Daesung to a quieter corner of the room. "You looked like you were drowning," she said. "Was it that obvious?" "Only to someone watching carefully." She smiled slightly. "Your speech was good, honest. My mother appreciated that." I didn't know what else to say. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Nari spoke again quietly. "I have been trying to remember the fire, pushing my mind to recall something, anything, but there is nothing. Just blank space where that day should be." "Maybe that's better," Daesung said. "Perhaps, but it feels wrong. Everyone knows this important thing about me. This trauma I experienced, and I do not remember it. It is like part of my life belongs to other people instead of me." He understood that feeling. His life had stopped belonging to him the moment he ran into that fire. Over the following days, court life established a rhythm. Mornings with Jiwoo, learning more about Valkyrian culture. Afternoons attending various functions where he was displayed like a trophy. Evenings alone in his quarters, recovering from the social exhaustion. But there were whispers. He caught them when he walked the palace corridors. Not everyone was happy with his presence. Conservative nobles who saw him as proof that their princess was weak, needing rescue from a primitive human. Military officers who thought the honor should have gone to Valkyrian security forces, who failed to prevent the attack in the first place. Anti-alien factions who protested outside the palace, calling him a propaganda tool. Queen Hana seemed unconcerned by the dissent. She continued inviting Daesung to private dinners where she asked her endless questions. He realized she was building a profile of him, trying to understand not just what he did but why he was capable of doing it. "Tell me about fear," she said one evening over a meal of food he still couldn't identify. "Fear," he repeated. "You were afraid in the fire. I could see it in the recording. Your hands shook. Your breathing was rapid. You were terrified." "Yes," he admitted. "And yet you acted anyway." How Daesung thought about that. "I don't think bravery means not being afraid. I think it means being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. The fear doesn't go away. You just decide it's not going to stop you." Queen Hana leaned back in her seat. Valkyrians are taught to eliminate fear through discipline and training. To act from logic rather than emotion. You suggest something different. That fear is acceptable, even useful. "Fear keeps you careful," Daesung said. "It's your body trying to protect you. But sometimes you have to tell your body that something else is more important than safety. Like a stranger's life. Like anyone's life." These dinners became his favorite part of being on Velkara. Queen Hana was intimidating, but she was also genuinely curious. She listened when he spoke. She challenged his ideas without dismissing them. He found himself looking forward to their conversations. 2 weeks into his stay, something changed. Princess Nari requested an informal meeting in the palace gardens. When Daesung arrived, he found her standing near a pool of luminescent water, staring at her reflection. I need to know what happened, she said without greeting. In the fire. Please tell me everything, so he did. He described the explosion, the spreading flames, finding her trapped. He told her about the beam, about the heat, about dragging her to safety. He kept his voice gentle, but he didn't hide the truth. As he spoke, Nari's expression changed. Pain flickered across her features. Her hands trembled, and then her eyes widened with recognition. The smell, she whispered. I remember the smell. Burning, chemical, and pain. So much pain. Your Highness, maybe we should stop. No! She stepped closer to him. Your hands. Can I see them? Confused, he held out his scarred hands. She took them carefully, turning them over, examining the burn patterns. And suddenly her legs gave out. Dae-sung caught her before she fell. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face. I remember, she gasped. I remember your hands. They were bleeding, burned. You kept saying it was okay, that you had me, that we were almost out. She looked up at him. You saved me. I remember now. You saved me. Guards rushed over, seeing their princess in distress. Medical staff appeared. But Nari refused to let go of Dae-sung's hands. I remember, she kept repeating. I remember. Later, after the doctors had checked her and confirmed she was physically fine, just emotionally overwhelmed, Dae-sung sat in his quarters and stared at his hands. The hands that had triggered her memory, the hands that had burned for her. He wondered if helping her remember had been a kindness or cruelty. But it wasn't his choice to make. She had needed to know, and now she did. After her memories returned, Princess Nari changed. The polite distance disappeared. She sought out Dae-sung daily, insisting they take walks through the gardens or share meals. She told him about Valkyrian culture, about her childhood, about her dreams for the future. And she spoke often about the fire, processing the trauma by speaking it aloud. In my culture, a life debt is sacred, she explained one afternoon as they walked beside a glowing stream. You saved my life at great personal cost. That creates an obligation that can never be fully repaid. You don't owe me anything, Dae-sung said for the 20th time. I know you believe that, but I do not. She stopped walking and turned to face him. I have spoken with my mother. I wish to formally swear myself to your service. To be your protector and advisor for as long as you live. Dae-sung stared at her in horror. Your Highness, you're a princess. You can't just, I can do exactly that. It is my right and my choice. But your people need you. Your mother needs you. I'm nobody. I don't need a princess following me around. Nari smiled sadly. You still do not understand what you did. You gave me my life back. How can I do less than offer you mine in return? He begged her to reconsider. She refused. Queen Hana, when he appealed to her, simply said that her daughter was old enough to make her own choices. He suspected the queen found his discomfort amusing. The formal oath ceremony was scheduled for a week later. Dae-sung spent that week trying and failing to talk Nari out of it. She was as stubborn as her mother. 3 days before the ceremony, everything changed. Dae-sung was walking through a public plaza, accompanied by his usual security detail. The plaza was busy with Valkyrians going about their day. He was starting to feel almost comfortable in public, no longer flinching when people stared. The plasma bolt came from a rooftop. It screamed through the air, meant for his head. One of his guards threw himself in front of Dae-sung. The bolt caught the guard in the chest. He died instantly. The other guards surrounded Dae-sung, shielding him with their bodies as more shots rained down. The world became chaos, screaming, running. His guards rushed him into a building. Behind them, more guards engaged the sniper. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the plaza. They locked down in a secured room. Dae-sung sat on the floor, shaking, while his remaining guards checked for additional threats. One guard, a young woman named Mina, knelt beside him. Are you injured? She asked. He shook his head. He couldn't speak. The dead guard's face was burned into his mind. Someone had died protecting him. Again. Queen Hana arrived within the hour with Princess Nari and a full military escort. She swept into the room like a storm, her face carved from ice. Unharmed? She demanded. Yes, Your Majesty, Mina reported. Guard Taeho gave his life to protect him. Taeho will be honored. Queen Hana looked at Dae-sung. This was an assassination attempt. Someone wants you dead. Over the next hours, details emerged. The sniper had been caught alive. Under interrogation, He revealed himself as a member of the Purity Movement, a Valkyrian extremist group. They believed honoring a human disgraced their species. They saw Daesung as a symbol of everything wrong with their queen's policies. But the interrogation revealed something more disturbing. The sniper was part of a larger conspiracy. The same group had cells throughout the capital. They had been planning something bigger than just killing one human. Queen Hana took personal control of the investigation. She moved Daesung to the palace's most secure wing and doubled his security. Nari insisted on being part of that security, despite her mother's protests. For 2 days, they stayed locked down while the investigation continued. Daesung, Nari, Jiwoo, and Queen Hana spent hours together in a secured chamber, going over every detail the interrogators extracted. The conspiracy was larger than anyone had imagined. The Purity Movement had been preparing for a coup. The original attack on the embassy, the one that started everything, had been meant to kill Princess Nari. Without an heir, succession rules would have created a crisis. The extremists planned to use that crisis to seize power and purge Velkara of all alien influence. "You saved more than my daughter," Queen Hana said grimly. "You saved my throne. And they hate you for it. So what do we do?" Daesung asked. Queen Hana smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We hunt them." Daesung found himself part of the planning despite having no military experience. But Queen Hana valued his perspective. "You think differently," she explained. "You see problems from angles my people miss." She was right. As an engineer, Daesung looked at systems and structures. When they showed him maps of the conspiracy's known locations, he saw patterns. Supply routes, communication nodes, weak points in their infrastructure. "They're using the old water purification network," he said, pointing to the map. "See these buildings? They're all connected underground by maintenance tunnels. That's how they're moving without being detected." The Valkyrian military officers looked skeptical, but Queen Hana ordered them to investigate. Within hours, they confirmed Daesung was correct. The discovery led them to 3 hidden weapons caches and 2 safe houses. "Your primitive human thinking is proving quite useful," Queen Hana said. There was no mockery in her voice. "Just observation." Daesung studied the maps more. "If I were planning a coup, I would need to strike at the palace. But palace security is too strong for a direct assault, so I would need to either disable the defenses or bypass them entirely." "The defenses cannot be disabled remotely," one officer said. "They are isolated systems." "What about maintenance access?" Daesung asked. "Every system has weak points, places where technicians need to get in for repairs." The officers exchanged glances. Nobody had considered that angle. Within an hour, they discovered that 3 maintenance technicians in the palace had connections to the Purity Movement. They had been planning to sabotage the shield generators during the oath ceremony, when security would be focused on the public event. The coup was meant to happen in 4 days. At the ceremony where Nari would swear her life debt to Daesung, Queen Hana's expression was terrible to see. "They plan to use my daughter's oath as cover to murder us all." "Not if we use their plan against them," Daesung said slowly. Everyone turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Queen Hana asked. "The ceremony is public knowledge. They know when it will happen. They think we don't know about their plan." He pointed to the map. "What if we let them think that? What if we go ahead with the ceremony, but we're ready for them? We could catch everyone involved at once. It was risky, dangerous, using himself, Nari, and Queen Hana as bait. But it was also the best chance to end the conspiracy completely." The officers argued against it. Too risky. Too many variables. But Queen Hana silenced them. "The human is right," she said. "We set a trap. We let them come to us. And we crushed them utterly." The next 3 days were intense preparation. Security teams positioned throughout the palace. Snipers on every rooftop. Hidden guards in every corridor. The oath ceremony would proceed as planned, but it would be a trap. Daesung spent those days with Nari and Jiwoo, confined to the secure wing. Jiwoo was terrified but trying to hide it. Nari was calm, almost eager. She had been trained for combat since childhood and seemed to welcome the chance to use those skills. "Are you scared?" Nari asked Daesung the night before the ceremony. "Terrified," he admitted. "Good. Fear will keep you careful. But do not let it control you. You have already proven you can act despite fear." The morning of the ceremony arrived. Daesung put on his formal clothes with shaking hands. The medal Queen Hana had given him hung around his neck. It felt heavier than ever. Mina, his guard who had protected him during the first assassination attempt, came to escort him. "Stay close to me," she said, "no matter what happens. Understand?" He nodded. They walked through the palace toward the grand hall. Every step felt like walking toward something terrible, but also necessary. This had to end. One way or another, today would end it. In the grand hall, thousands gathered just as they had for his honor ceremony. But this time, hidden among them were threats, conspirators waiting to strike. And surrounding them, invisible but present, were Queen Hana's forces. The trap was set. Daesung stood before the throne with Princess Nari, who looked serene and beautiful in her ceremonial robes. Queen Hana sat watching them with the expression of a predator waiting to pounce. The ceremony began. Nari spoke the ancient words of life debt. Daesung responded as he had been taught, and beneath them in the maintenance tunnels the conspirators moved into position. The moment was coming. Daesung could feel it approaching like a storm. His heart hammered. His scarred hands clenched into fists, then the lights went out. The assault had begun. The darkness lasted 3 seconds, long enough for panic to ripple through the crowd, long enough for the conspirators to think their sabotage had worked. Then the emergency lights activated, bathing everything in blue-white brilliance. The conspirators realized their mistake too late. They had cut the main power as planned, but the backup systems they thought were disabled came online immediately. Queen Hana's engineers had worked through the night to ensure that now the attackers were exposed. Armed figures appeared throughout the hall, emerging from the crowd. 20 of them, maybe more. They raised weapons toward the throne platform, but Queen Hana's guards were ready. They had been waiting for exactly this moment. The hall erupted in controlled chaos. Guards moved with precision, engaging the attackers. Civilians scattered, trained by emergency drills that had been quietly implemented over the past 3 days. Mina grabbed Daesung and pulled him down behind the throne platform. Nari moved with fluid grace, producing a blade from somewhere in her robes. She took a defensive position beside him. "Stay down," Nari commanded. "Do not move." But Daesung couldn't just hide. From his position, he could see the tactical displays that Queen Hana's officers were using. The attackers in the hall were just a distraction. The real threat was below in the maintenance tunnels. A larger force was trying to reach the shield generators. "The tunnels," he shouted to Mina. "They're going for the generators." Mina spoke rapidly into her comm. Daesung heard the response. The guards in the tunnels were engaged but outnumbered. The conspirators had brought more force than expected. "I can help," Daesung said. "I know those tunnels. I studied the schematics." "Absolutely not," Mina said. "I'm an engineer. I can shut down access points, seal blast doors, route them into dead ends." He looked at her desperately. "I can help." Nari appeared beside them. "He is right. His knowledge is tactical advantage. Her Majesty will execute me if he is harmed," Mina protested. "Then do not let him be harmed." Nari pulled Daesung to his feet. "We go together." They moved through corridors that Daesung had walked dozens of times in the past weeks. But now they were war zones. Weapons fire echoed. Guards rushed past them toward different sections. The palace's beauty became backdrop to violence. They reached a maintenance access point. Daesung used his engineering override codes to open it. The tunnel beyond was dark and narrow, built for utility rather than comfort. "Stay behind me," Nari said. She moved into the tunnel with her blade ready. Mina followed, her weapon scanning for threats. Daesung came last, carrying a portable terminal that gave him access to the tunnel's control systems. They could hear fighting ahead. The clash of weapons, shouting in Valkyrian. The conspirators were trying to force their way through a checkpoint. Queen Hana's guards were holding them back, but barely. Daesung called up the tunnel map on his terminal. He saw the problem immediately. The conspirators were forcing the guards backward toward a junction. If they reached it, they could split up and attack the generators from multiple angles. "I can seal the junction," Daesung said. "Lock them in this section, but I need to get to that control panel." He pointed ahead past where the fighting was happening. "Impossible," Mina said. "You would have to go through the combat zone." "Then we go through it," Nari said simply. What happened next became a blur in Daesung's memory. Nari moved like water and lightning combined, her blade flashing. She cut through the conspirators with precise efficiency. Mina provided covering fire, her aim perfect. They carved a path through the chaos. Daesung ran. His legs burned. His lungs screamed. But he reached the control panel. His scarred fingers flew over the interface, inputting commands he had memorized from the schematics. The junction's blast door started to close. A conspirator saw what he was doing and turned toward him. Daesung froze. The attacker raised a weapon. Jiwoo appeared from nowhere. Sweet, gentle Jiwoo, who had been teaching him about culture and etiquette. She threw herself between Daesung and the weapon. The blast caught her in the stomach. She fell. Daesung caught her. Her blood was silver, not red, but it poured out just the same. "The doors," she gasped. "Finish it." He wanted to help her, wanted to stop the bleeding. But the conspirators were coming. If he didn't finish sealing the junction, everything would be lost. Nari appeared beside Jiwoo. "I have her. Complete your task." Daesung turned back to the panel. His hands shook. He could hear Jiwoo's ragged breathing behind him. He forced himself to focus. 3 more commands. 2. 1. The blast doors slammed shut with a sound like thunder. The conspirators were trapped in the sealed section. Guards poured in from the other direction, surrounding them. Daesung turned back to Jiwoo. Nari was applying pressure to the wound, but there was so much blood. Jiwoo's eyes were glazing over. "You helped me," Daesung said, his voice breaking. "You are my friend." Jiwoo smiled weakly. "Honored to be." "Honored to—" Her voice faded. Her eyes closed. Medics arrived moments later. They worked desperately to stabilize her. But Daesung saw it in their faces. She was dying. The battle in the hall above had ended. The conspirators there had been captured or killed. In the tunnels, the trapped attackers surrendered when they realized their situation was hopeless. The coup had failed, but Jiwoo was dying, and it was because she had saved him. They carried her to the medical wing. Queen Hana arrived, her robe still perfect despite the chaos. She looked at Jiwoo's still form on the medical table, then at Daesung. "She chose," Queen Hana said quietly, "as you chose. Do not dishonor her choice with guilt." But how could he not feel guilty? Another person dead because of him. Another life sacrificed to save his. He sat outside the medical wing for hours. Nari sat beside him, silent but present. Eventually, a doctor emerged. Her expression told them everything before she spoke. "I am sorry. We could not save her." Daesung buried his face in his scarred hands and wept. The aftermath took days to process. The conspiracy's leaders were identified and arrested. Dozens of members of the Purity movement were captured. Queen Hana purged her court and military of anyone connected to the plot. It was brutal and necessary. Jiwoo's funeral was held in the palace gardens beside the glowing stream. Hundreds attended. Queen Hana herself spoke, praising Jiwoo's courage and sacrifice. Princess Nari placed a memorial crystal at the base of a tree that would grow for centuries. Daesung stood apart from the crowd, feeling like an intruder. This was his fault. Jiwoo had died protecting him. He didn't deserve to be here. After the ceremony, Queen Hana found him. They walked in silence for a while before she spoke. "You blame yourself, it wasn't a question." Daesung nodded anyway. "I watched you burn for my daughter," Queen Hana said. "I saw you choose certain agony for an uncertain chance to save a stranger. Do you know what I saw in that moment?" He shook his head. "I saw someone who believed that other lives had value, who acted on that belief without hesitation. Jiwoo saw the same thing. That is why she came to Velkara with us, why she volunteered to teach you our culture, why she chose to protect you." Queen Hana stopped walking and faced him. "You did not kill her. The conspirators did. But you inspired her. You showed her what it meant to value life above safety. She learned from you, and she acted on that lesson. I never wanted anyone to die for me, no one does. But sometimes the most important thing we do is show others how to be brave. Jiwoo was always brave. You simply reminded her of why bravery matters." They continued walking. Eventually, Queen Hana spoke again. "You came to Velkara as my guest. As someone I wanted to study and understand. I thought I would learn about human nature by observing you. But I learned something different. I learned that courage is not a species trait. It is individual. And it is contagious," she gestured to the palace around them. "My people were complacent. We thought ourselves superior to other species. We valued logic over compassion, order over action. You disrupted that thinking. You showed us something we had forgotten." "What?" Daesung asked. "That sometimes the right choice is not the logical choice. That sometimes you must act despite the odds. That sometimes burning yourself is worth it if it means someone else lives." She looked at him with something that might have been respect. You're going to leave soon. Return to your station, your simple life, and I cannot stop you because that is who you are. But Velkara will remember you. We will tell your story, the human who taught us to burn. 3 days later, Daesung stood before Queen Hana in private audience one final time. She offered him many things. A permanent position in her court. A title, wealth, protection. He refused all of it. I'm an engineer, he said simply. I fix things. That's where I belong, Queen Hana smiled. I know. That is why I am not forcing you to stay. But I give you this. She handed him a small crystal. It is a communication device. Direct line to the throne. Should you ever need aid, use it. Velkara will answer. She stepped closer. I give you also a title in our language. One that has no translation, but I will try. Firewalker, he who bears flames. It means one who sacrifices self for others. One who lights the darkness with their burning. Wear it with honor. Princess Nari escorted him to the ship. She had wanted to come with him, to fulfill her life debt, but he had convinced her to stay. Her people needed her. Her mother needed her. He did not.